but they had the OTK Games Expo, the Winter Games Expo, and when I was watching the expo, I saw a number of really good games, but one that kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit, and that is a WoW dev who left Blizzard a few years ago, four-ish years ago, maybe 5 years ago, after 13 years on the WoW dev team. I believe they spent some time working on things like Monk, working on things like PvP, but of course, you guys probably know more than I do, but the name raised some eyebrows. So I'm like, well, let's reflect, let's look back at maybe their history, and also why did they leave Blizzard? So I think it was 13 years at Blizzard. It's gotta be meaningful, right?
In this video, I'm just going to do a quick personal update on me, and that personal update is that after 13 years working at Blizzard on World of Warcraft, I've decided to leave. And the reason why I'm making this video, I guess, is just because it's been 4 weeks or so since I've left, and I think anybody who's ever worked at a company and left like I have knows this experience of your friends and your coworkers and people that care about you reaching out and wondering, why did you leave and what's the story and what are you up to next? But I thought about making a tweet or a post or something like that, but I thought ultimately maybe making a video might be the way to go, and so that's really what this is. Before I say anything,
I think this happens with any company, like when you're there for a long time. I think it's unfortunate with how Blizzard is now that you don't necessarily have these big names anymore. At least you don't really hear about them anymore. When you see names nowadays, it's kind of names that were of yesteryear. So I'm hoping that kind of becomes the thing again. Where we have, Chris Metzins, and we have the Ian Hazakostas of the new generation of WoW. But it is difficult with a company that's that big.
anything, I do want to stress that, I really did enjoy time working at Blizzard. I wouldn't have stayed as long as I did if I didn't write. What's really great about the company and about the studio is the incredible talent that works there. Many people at Blizzard and on the WoW team are friends of mine.
I think it's a weathering thing. Like, you get weathered over time. Even if you love you realize your heart's not in the game anymore. And that's the apathy is probably the worst of it, but clearly he's still passionate.
Like family to me. And so, this video isn't really to elicit any ill will towards them or to the studio or any of that. It's really just kind of tell my own story. And likewise, for anyone who's left or thinking about leaving or staying, everybody has their own sort of career goals, their own sort of path that they're on. And so their reasons for staying or leaving is not necessarily going to be the same as mine. And so again, it's really just a personal experience. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Chris Kaleiki. I'm a game designer. I worked at Blizzard since 2007 or so. And I worked on the WoW team doing system design, mainly class design and PvP.
Nice.
And before working at Blizzard, I was a huge Blizzard fan, just like many of you. I played a lot of Warcraft 3. I played a lot of StarCraft, and I played World of Warcraft since it was in early beta. And in WoW, I was a guild leader of a kind of a more popular PvP guild at the time on Tichondrius. And some of the things that I really loved to do in WoW, outside of play, it was really kind of the theory craft about the game. Think about, what they should change, what they should remove, what spells they should add, things like that. I'd really bug my guild about, bouncing ideas off them. I would do these.
This is why I like these, the game expos, because I think exposing people to a more variety of games is good for a lot of people. I think there's a number of people who are very much stuck in they're a one game kind of person. I definitely have periods where I'm on one game for a bit, but I think it's always good to change up what game you're playing, or always have something you're playing on the side that's different from your main game.
These fake patch notes that would go viral where, I would list out things that I felt like they should change in the game, and things that I predicted they would change. And I think they went viral, right, because people really did think a lot of those changes should be added. And in fact, a lot of times they would add them later on. And one thing led to another, and I kind of met someone who worked at Blizzard through my server, and I sent him a lot of my ideas and things that they should change. And they started to add a lot of those ideas to the game. And one thing led to another, and they kind of suggested maybe I apply to be a designer there, and I did, and the interview went well, and kind of the rest is history. And one of my original goals when I started to work at Blizzard was really not just class design, but also PvP. I was a big PvPer as well. And but the thing is, the team was a lot smaller than I imagined. You know, I think as a player, I thought, well, they probably have a warrior designer and a priest designer and a hunter designer, and you know, they all hang out and go to Starbucks. But
I think the exact opposite of that is what we have now with Blizzard, which is like the hyper sectionalization. I work in a medical field, and the medical field I work in is very much it's very small, but the bigger the facility, the more sectional, like the more it becomes like just divided. And you can have people who are on the exact same team you are, but they work in a different department, and you have zero interaction with them because their focus is one specific part. And it becomes very clicky and very separated. And because of that discongruency, there's a lot of like butting of heads, but also like competing issues that like overlap. So I got to imagine it's the same in the dev world.
But the reality was that the team was a lot smaller than that. And it was really kind of me at the time for a while, just me and another class designer, this guy, Kevin Jordan, who really designed out a lot of the early classes. And so
I like how he says Kevin Jordan just casually. So that's the
so this was like around production time of Wrath of the Lich King, and there was a lot of class design.
Hi, how are you?
I remember one of the first things I worked on was I wanted to change the Discipline Priest's pain suppression, because at the time it would only work on the priests, but I wanted it to work on allies and on allies as well. And so that really kind of transformed the spec from just being to be more viable in PvP and also in raids. And that was kind of really one of my main focuses as well. Is just that,
and look at Discipline Priest now, top of their game. What's nothing much to just trying out maybe a new game, and it's actually from a WoW prior dev.
The team at the time was very kind of on the fence of whether they wanted certain specs to be PvP specs or PvE specs. Should warriors mainly just be tanks in PvE? Should druids and paladins also have DPS specs? And for me,
well, they failed with that one because warriors were the top of everything. Is this game out yet? They have a playtest out right now. It's Legacy, Steel, and Sorcery.
Felt it was sort of a duty to the player to really make all these specs and classes viable in as many aspects of the game as possible. And so really that was one of my main early focuses. Some of the things I worked on, I set up a website with some list of things I've worked on, but I'll put it in the description below. But some of the things I worked on was the monk class. I was the main designer for the monk class. The Mistweaver really was the spec that I designed for myself. Just kind of the way that I like to heal. I
think Mistweaver's it's not in as good a state as, actually, I think, yeah, it's not as good a state as Priest, but I think it's pretty averaged out.
I designed a lot of PvP talent system, war mode. In Shadowlands, some of the things I worked on was monk legendaries, the Shadow Priest revamp I did, and there's some other war mode content in there as well that I hope turns out well. And so
I've said this before in other videos, but I think war mode is one of those things that it's unfortunate that that's where we're at, where people use war mode solely for like XP, and not really much else. Where we've gotten to a point where people's concerns about playing solo and not really being bothered by other people is their main concern, and not really interacting with people, positive or negative. So
why did I leave? I think it's complicated, right? I think there's a lot of different reasons, but I think the main reason is just that, for a while, probably too long, I've just been kind of unhappy with the state of the game, right? And it wasn't until when Classic came out that I really kind of knew I was able to figure out why. And I think the reason
Classic opening up our eyes. 20-year-old game opening our eyes.
The reason why is that in Classic, the vision of the game is very clear, right? It's big concepts like the world is the main character, the player is the story, the community is the content, and
exactly. And I feel like too often now with retail WoW, you're just kind of a bystander in the world, and you're very much just like, you're forced to absorb like a lot of stuff that you don't really care for, instead of kind of being the person who guides the world. Like, you're just kind of there.
And I think in the modern game, these pillars still exist, but I think to a lesser degree. And I think the vision in the modern game is a little muddled in that way. Um, and so, what are some examples, right? What do I mean exactly? One example I think is the concept of the guild. I think in classic, the guild's a big deal, right? In order to do
Now they basically, we do this one specific thing, so you don't have to queue for as long, or you don't, I don't know, like you don't have to spam trade chat for crafting. Guilds are just, you won't have this feature unless you have a guild. So might as well be in a guild so you get this feature.
really anything at endgame, you really need to be in a guild. And so really what this does is it kind of creates interdependence among players where they kind of really need each other in order to be successful. And
Let me be fair. I would say you still want a decent guild is still important for that, but you need it to such small of a degree, you could probably get away with not having it for the most part.
I think this can feel really restrictive at times, but ultimately what it really does is it creates cohesion, it creates community. Um, and I think over time players kind of fought against this just because, they wanted to play the game solo where they didn't really have to worry about other players or have
Whoops. Why'd you leave? Chris, why'd you leave?
to worry about like some guild leader barking orders at them. And, I think that's fair. And I think that makes a lot of
Controlling player behavior is one of the biggest flaws of retail WoW right now. An attempt to control player behavior, but also a leniency to want to give the players something that's antithetical to what the game wants to provide. Nowadays, it seems like every game is trying to be everything to everyone, and it's trying to appeal to such a mass amount of people that, in a sense, it won't appeal to anybody in a great degree. And so what happens is it loses the essence of what the game intends. And so when you have like these, like it's like fan service, but it's like it's feeding off of the such a small percent of the player base, or such a large percent of the player base, that it's like it's massively appealing to nobody, but at least to a minimal level, it's enjoyable. Like it reaches the minimums.
Ultimately, it's big changes like that have really changed the game. Another example I think is the story. I think, Warcraft and WoW has always had a story, but I think lately in the modern game, I feel like the story is such a bigger part of it. I think the characters and all their own dramas, I think, really kind of soak up a lot of air in the game. Whereas, I think in a virtual world and an MMO, really the players are the story. On classic, what
Yeah, it's almost immersion breaking how much like you feel like an outsider to the whole story when you used to be so like the most important part. Like, you drove the story.
What's funny is our guild gets a lot of drama, a lot of heat because a lot of the players in the guild like to prevent others from resetting the Inixia buff with the head. This really pisses off a lot of players, and we get a lot of grief, and people ban us from groups and things like that. And it's funny, but it creates a player story, and I think it creates drama.
Yeah, he loves the drama. This is classic PvP players, by the way. This is
in the game. And I think
love and drama, love and the
griefing
griefing.
is some this human element, this player drama. And I know players really love the story of WoW. I do too. And I love a lot of the characters and the cinematics and things like that.
With it, like a good example to explain it for somebody who's like not like a streamer or content creator, or if you don't frequent those things, is that within your guilds and your own mini communities, you were able to create content for 10, 20 people, because you had these little micro communities, just like streaming communities, just like content creators, that would literally be your TV. It would be your entertainment, because you were able to do like you were basically able to insert your own personality, your character, and that was your immersion, because you were living through that. Like that's what Evelyn is about. It's not about characters that appeal to your specific section of diversity, or your specific disability. It's about a game that allows you to express yourself, in the sense that you're able to drive how the game is played for others and how they experience the game, because your little guilds or your communities, or even just like Baron's chat, like that drives or influences the conversation.
But again, I feel like this shift really does change the game, and has a real effect. Um, there's a lot of other minor things. I feel like um, we focus a lot too much on the extrinsic rather than the intrinsic gameplay. I feel there's too much focus on these progression systems and on engagement.
The progression systems have progression systems. The retention systems have retention systems. The upgrade systems have upgrade systems.
And instead, I think we should really focus on the core features of the game. Like again, like systems like the guild system. I feel like we should be focusing on features that really, features that really an MMO can only do, right? And of course, there's millions of players who really love.
And this is why WoW will mess up housing. Almost certainly. Like, this is why I'm like hesitant, even though I've wanted housing in WoW for so long. It's like, this is why they will mess it up.
Love WoW how it is currently, and love the modern game. And I think that's really just the point of it all, is just that really it's not so much a problem with the game as it is really just kind of a disconnect between what the modern game is and what the game used to be for me. I would say though that
a lot of people will dismiss this and be like, oh, just a classic Andy, another classic Andy. But I feel like the retail goes in such a different direction. And don't get me wrong, I know I've said a lot of negative things about retail. I'm aware of that. I actively play both classic and retail. I do still have things that I enjoy about retail. Updating, like the updated content and challenging content is still interesting to me, but it's become so much of like a ledge that I'm standing on within WoW, as opposed to a whole new world. I feel like exploring or trying something new. I exist very much in a very small space in WoW, and I'm probably not going to go beyond that. I'll always go for challenging raid content, and I'll do occasional challenging mythic content, and then maybe that's it. Like that's where I enjoy the game.
You could say the vision of the modern game has maybe changed, but I think even if that's true, I feel like that vision isn't so clear. And I think I hear this a lot with players who they feel like, what is WoW really about anymore, whatever it is. And I think that's a problem. But I think the bigger problem actually is what I would hear from, developers on the team, that they are also confused about what the vision of the game is, right? And I think some of them think the vision has never changed, and some feel like it's this new modern take. And I think that is going to be the biggest challenge for the team going forward. I really love this quote that's something like, if you want to build a ship, you don't drum up the people and tell them what to do, and tell this guy to gather wood and this guy to build the sail or whatever it is. Instead,
what you do is you take all of their loot, and then you say, if you want it back, you have to do these things for me.
You teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And in doing that, you don't need to tell people what to do, because they just know where they're going, and what the goal is. And
you just got to be a very demanding guild leader and put it on master loot, and then do GDKP runs.
And so yeah, I really feel like if there's a big challenge for the WoW team, it's really to figure out what that vision is and what the modern game is and how it differentiates from classic. As for the company, I think it's a very different company than it was 13 years ago. I think the company is so much bigger than it used to be. I remember there was like one building, and now there's like 16, or I don't know how many they are now. And so not that that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing because it really tells you that Blizzard is successful and that people want more of its ideas, of its creations, and that's great. But I think, you know, if there's any challenge with the studio now or going forward, it's really just a challenge of scale, and I think that's a challenge that any company goes through once they grow. Um,
Yeah, and the WoW has definitely had like their ups and downs. It's hard to say. A lot of people say, you know, things are improving, things are getting better. But he's right. I think that the ultimately it's a thing of scale. It's like you're not going to appeal to everybody. You know, not everyone's gonna like Linkin Park's new album, but some people might, and some people may always will. May always will. So it's just a thing of. I think that some people are able to evolve with it, and to them things never got worse. They always just changed, and they always feel like it's for the better. I think for some though, I think they reflect on it and they go, it's hard whenever WoW is all you play, because WoW can be a game that's the only game you play. It's kind of difficult when that's all you're doing to like reflect truly. I think you have to truly leave it to understand maybe what you don't like about it.
and so, but I think ultimately, you know, I think WoW and Blizzard will persevere. I think they have incredibly talented people that work there, and I think the IPs are so strong and great. And so I think really ultimately long term, WoW and Blizzard will be totally fine. Um, but I think this brings it back to me now, which I think, you know, all these things have sort of forced me to reflect on on what I want to do and, you know, where I want to be. And it's sort of this has really reminded me of you know, why I wanted to work on WoW in the first place. And I think that really is because I wanted to work on a virtual world. Um, and I think ultimately, despite its flaws, you know, WoW really is still the king of virtual worlds, and I think will be for a long time. But I used to think Blizzard maybe, you know, would hold that crown forever, or be the one who would, you know, discover the next big virtual world. But these days, I just don't know if that's true. Um,
I think the best example or that I could come up with, or I guess like saying I could come up with, is given the current WoW dev team, I don't think, like, say WoW never existed. I don't think WoW now could create WoW back then. Um, I don't think the same people. I don't think even if you put more people into it, I just don't think they could recreate that if WoW never existed. If MMOs never existed, I don't think they have the same intent as they did. Um, I think it's grown beyond its growth. It's plateaued. I mean, I think it's reached a plateau, and the only way to maintain it is just by like grabbing at straws at things um, that players, not the current players want, but enough to kind of interest just people to keep just to keep their subscription alive. That's what it feels like.
but what I do know is that I want to be part of that, right? I want to be part of the next big virtual world. I think, you know, some people say that virtual worlds are sort of over and that games now are more about like battle royales or mobile projects or wherever that is. But I think that's insane. I think that's totally wrong. I think the real world, you know, sucks in a lot of ways, and I think these virtual worlds that we create are so amazing and so, you know, are going to become more increasingly essential to our lives in the future. So if the future is going to be virtual worlds, you know, that's really what I want to be a part of. And so that's really what I'm doing. I'm looking around. I'm seeing what's possible. I don't know what I'm going to do exactly yet, but you know, when I figure that out, you'll be the first to know. Uh, to my Blizzard family in the WoW team, you know, I'm rooting for Shadowlands. I know it's going to be incredibly successful. I'm so excited to play it. And
Ooh, ooh. I mean, Shadowlands, to give it credit, was it really popped off in the beginning. So it wasn't nothing. I just didn't really hold on to that. But yeah, so Legacy, Steel, and Sorcery playtest is out. A lot of like high expectations for this game in the sense that I feel like we'll get a lot of those qualities that he really preached about in a game like this. It's good to see that devs have this second life, you know, that these big projects that they're known for and that they establish, they lead life into other projects. You know, if we could say anything has come good from Blizzard, is that it made really like almost like these legacy houses of devs and creators who feel inspired. It feels like whenever you had moments with like Bethesda games, and you had people who felt inspired and made their own version of their own version of like a Skyrim, their own version of like a Fallout or survival or like type of game. So it's good to see that those things still can exist. So I mean, ultimately, I think it's really impressive. So, yeah, high hopes for Legacy still in Sorcery, and I hope that it achieves everything it's supposed to. But until next time, I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.